Not hearing the intro, Brendan.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Biden pledges enough vaccine for every American by the end of May. Meanwhile, Texas and Mississippi decide the pandemic is over for them. They lift the mask mandate and go full capacity at businesses. Senate on the verge of voting for a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly. Republicans look to shiv the Voting Rights Act. Have a bad day at the Supreme Court. Question is, will it matter? Meanwhile, in New York State, calls mount for Andrew Cuomo's resignation in the wake of revelations about impropriety with women and his sending COVID patients to nursing homes and covering it up. Neera Tanden's nomination for the Office of Management and Budget withdrawn, sunk by Joe Manchin and Republicans. Georgia responds to a Republican 2020 loss by passing a bill to keep people from voting. Pentagon Inspector General finds Trump's military doctor and now Texas congressman denigrated female colleagues, used excessive booze and Ambien. That tracks. Montana, meanwhile, votes down a right-to-work bill. Warren, Sanders, and others introduce a wealth tax aimed at multi-millionaires and billionaires. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. With me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Happy Wednesday, Emma. This is, we've almost made it through half the week at this point.
Oof. Yeah, it's March, but still feels, although it's a pretty nice day out today, but overall, I'm having a lot of winter fatigue for sure.
There's a lot of winter fatigue. There's a lot of COVID fatigue, obviously. And we are so close. Like you say, you look out the window, it looks almost like spring, except for it's a little bit colder than it should be for spring. But, you know, for March 3rd, we're doing okay. We're so close. We're so close. And of course, if we were the governor of Texas, we would say, you know what? I know this is 100-yard or a marathon, but we're going to check out somewhere around mile 12.
Yeah.
We're going to try and Rosie Ruiz this. How's that for a dated reference?
I don't know it. So
I don't know.
Oh, wow. Sports reference that
Wow.
Emma doesn't know. Interesting.
Rosie Ruiz, who is that?
She was I believe, if I remember correctly, she was the woman who in the Boston Marathon. This is probably 30 years ago. Left the marathon, took a car and got out and jumped back in and won the marathon.
Thinking outside the box.
Exactly.
I kind of love her.
I mean, it was. I'm not sure if the regulations had said you can't do that. So,
but she found a way around the rules of having to run that long. God
Indeed.
forbid.
Indeed. And at least in Texas and Mississippi, they have decided, you know what? Tired of the pandemic. I think we're going to just say it's over. And, we are literally 3 or 4 weeks out from the vaccination being available enough and widely available enough and actually vaccinating people where, it's a 3 or 4 week, maybe a 6 week difference could make all the difference in the world. We have seen over the course of the past 60 days, the rates of infection, the rates of hospitalization, the rates of death drop precipitously, although now it is plateaued. Folks aren't quite sure why it's plateaued. They don't know if it's because maybe people have been relaxing a little bit, maybe because there's a certain amount of virus that's out there, and there's a baseline that you can get to if you have this many people who are available, potential hosts for the infection. They also don't know if it's a function of variants. We just don't know. But we will get a sense if these relaxations, as they could be called,
or eliminations, zero mask mandate in Texas and 100% opening at full capacity everywhere. Cool.
I mean, it's just it's stunning. And the difference between doing this now and 6 weeks from now, I think will be dramatic. And part of that is because of this announcement by Joe Biden. Originally, he had said 1 million vaccines per day for 100 days. I think we are above that now, certainly. And I think we're about to be significantly above it. I think they're going to get close to 2 million vaccines a day within a matter of weeks, largely because of this Johnson & Johnson, but also because the production is ramped up on the Pfizer. Its production is ramped up on the Moderna. I know that in New York State, there are counties who are getting, 3 times the amount of vaccine that they got just 2 or 3 weeks ago. Joe Biden has announced that there will be enough supply. Let's be clear here, supply, right? That doesn't mean that people are going to be vaccinated, but enough supply for every adult in this country by the end of May.
It's incredible. That's a 2-month bump up because July was initially the target.
End of July, correct. And so let's play this clip. This is President Biden yesterday making that announcement.
We're now on track to have enough vaccine supply for every adult in America by the end of May. Let me say that again. When we came into office, the prior administration had contracted for not nearly enough vaccine to cover adults in America. We rectified that. About 3 weeks ago, we were able to say that we'll have enough vaccine supply for adults by the end of July. And I'm pleased to announce today, as a consequence of the stepped-up process that I've ordered and just outlined, this country will have enough vaccine supply, I'll say it again, for every adult in America by the end of May. By the end of May. That's progress, important progress. But
not just progress, it's an exponential leap.
Exponential leap. And I guess, look, I find it hard to believe at this point that they would go out there and they would have Joe Biden make this announcement if they weren't extremely confident that they were going to be able to say by the end of May, look, there are now 300 million vaccinations available, or 250 million vaccinations available. And some of those will be single dose and some of those will be double dose. I would be very surprised. And it seems to me that, at that point, maybe you do even better than the end of May. And then the question becomes distribution. Well, the upside of all this, to the extent that there's an upside of not having vaccines in the amount that were anticipated at this point, is that you've basically given all of these outlets that we anticipate distributing it. That means counties, state facilities. That means drugstore chains. Ultimately, that'll mean doctors' offices and also hospitals. They've all been prepared to do this. In some instances, they've been doing it, and they've been doing it with less vaccines than they wanted to. So they have the capacity and they have at least the structure. And then it's just a question of how hard is it to scale those. And I think most of these entities have a sense of that. I was listening to an interview with like the local county supervisor around here, and he was like, we've been prepared to do 4 times as many vaccines, for months. And so to scale up and just do 2 or 3 times the amount that we're prepared to do, we can do that.
Right.
And so, if they had the vaccines, they'd be able to vaccinate everybody in this county. It's not a huge county, within a matter of 6 weeks.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to note, we're critical of Joe Biden when we need to be. We come from a progressive perspective. That's how I'd characterize my perspective, at least. It's been a home run thus far with the vaccine distribution in terms of utilizing the Defense Production Act, compelling Merck to basically create the Johnson & Johnson vaccine so that it can be disseminated at a much higher rate. And then, of course, what we saw with the purchasing of additional Moderna and Pfizer double dose vaccines. I've had zero issues with how Joe Biden has approached this. And I think it goes to show, at least in this area, there is a real stark difference in competent leadership versus what we saw under Trump.
Right. This was the pitch, Joe Biden's pitch, essentially, to America, which is like, I'm going to be able to do the competent things. I'm going to be able to do the sort of like functions of government in a competent manner. It was also just reported the other day that Donald Trump, before he left the office, like literally on the way out, he and Melania got the vaccine. And
by the way, it's not even like he would need it or she would need it. They just had COVID. I mean, who knows? But
it's conceivable because of the treatment that he received that he didn't build the antibodies that one would. I mean, that's conceivable. And so why wouldn't you take the vaccine at that point? But what you would do if you weren't a sociopath, what you would do if you weren't sort of like clinically narcissistic, and I caveat, I'm not a psychologist. This is not a medical, but you would say to the American public, I've gotten the vaccine, you should get yours. Right? I mean, like the role.
Biden did it publicly. He got
course.
His, yeah.
Of course. I mean, that's what you would do.
But the report said, Sam, he wanted to continue to appeal to the anti-vaxxer crowd. So like, that's where he's at. That's where his head is at, right? In the middle of a pandemic. So again, the bar is the floor. Understand that Trump was, sub the floor. He was in the basement, obviously. But I do think, as we're going to be critiquing Joe Biden's stance on Saudi Arabia and his lack of sanctioning MBS, as we're critiquing his $15 minimum wage caving, as we're critiquing all these things. Look, guys, we're trying to be consistent here. This has been a home run in terms of what we've seen with the vaccines, in my view.
I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about the COVID relief bill. It is on the verge of being voted upon in the Senate. There's some last minute negotiations that are taking place. We will talk about that when we get back. In the meantime, you've heard me multiple times stressed the importance of protecting your online activity with ExpressVPN. But there's another reason you're going to love using ExpressVPN. You ready for this, Emma? We're in a pandemic. Everybody has been like going through shows that they, in their queues that they've had there for ages. Everybody's like run through all of their marathons. Well,
I'm rewatching a show right now.
Well, I got good news for you.
Nice.
So Netflix, right? Thousands of shows on Netflix are only available outside the US. It's true. Netflix has, Netflix in England, in countries all over across the country. The world. And they don't necessarily have the rights to shows, to show them in America. They have the rights to say, we can show this in England. We can show it in Japan. Well, the ExpressVPN app encrypts your data, reroutes it through a server location of your choice. Are you catching this now? So it not only protects your data, but it lets you control which country you want Netflix to think you're in.
Whoa.
ExpressVPN lets you choose from over 90 different countries. So every time you run out of stuff to watch, you fire up the app on your laptop or on your smart TV. You could do it on your phone. Switch your country, hit connect. And it's not just for Netflix. You can use ExpressVPN to unlock shows or sports on other streaming services too, all around the world. Be smart, protect your data, stop paying full price for streaming services while only getting access to a fraction of their content. Visit expressvpn.com/majority right now. Get 3 extra months of their service for free. That's ExpressVPN, ExpressVPN.com/majority, expressvpn.com/majority to learn more. Also, folks, a little hesitant to go into places with a bunch of other people these days. Completely understandable. Also, people like to save money. They like to save time. So what's the solution? Well, stamps.com. Why? Because you don't need to go to the post office if that's not the way you want to spend your time. Stamps.com allows you to mail and ship anytime, anywhere, right from your computer. You send letters, you ship packages, and you pay a lot less with discounted rates from the U.S. Postal Service and UPS and more. Stamps.com, you use your printer to print, your computer, I guess. Then you use your printer to print official U.S. postage. And you can do this. You want to do it at 9 in the morning? All right, great. Oh, what if you want to do it at 3 a.m.? Okay, fine. Midnight, anytime.
On a boat?
Well, if you got a computer and a printer on a boat,
well, you're going to do the
Dr. Seuss thing.
Yeah, well,
any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere you want to send it. All you got to do is then you just schedule a pickup or you drop it off. Stamps.com, you get discounts for up to 40% off of post office rates. And you ready for this? Up to 62% off of UPS shipping rates. It's nuts. Stop wasting time. Stop wasting time going to the post office. Stop wasting time, period. Go to stamps.com instead. There's no risk. And with my promo code Majority Report, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, type in Majority Report. That's stamps.com, promo code Majority Report. Stamps.com. You'll never have to leave your home again. Lastly, mentioned this yesterday. Folks know I'm a little bit parsimonious. Is that the way? Did I get that right? But I also like quality. And with Harry's, I don't have to choose. Harry's gives you award-winning blades at factory direct prices. For a limited time, Harry's is offering their starter set plus a free body wash for just $3 at harrys.com/majority. Emma said yesterday that her boyfriend loves the flavor of the he's not supposed to eat the body wash.
I misspoke because we had just talked about Magic Spoon, the smell, and I was specifically told about the texture of the gel being light and not too heavy, but still washing.
You guys have a weird relationship. Harry's delivers a close, comfortable shave at a fair price. Just $2 per refill. Harry's believes in quality so much that they bought their own factory in Germany so they could own every step of the manufacturing process. And apparently, this German factory is one of the few places in the world where they do the Gothic arch. I don't know what that is, but I can tell you this. It's a great shave. They've got the trimmer blades, which I usually talk about. I went to a ear, nose, and throat person because I've been having some issues. They told me I have a deviated septum. And so now I know why I have like my asymmetry with my nostrils. And ultimately, whatever it was, I got punched in the nose as a kid or fell or whatever it was, led me to appreciate Harry's more.
Okay.
I mean, that was like, honestly, my first thought was like, oh, I've been living this for a long time. I didn't realize.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's not the only reason why I like Harry's. I like it because it's less expensive than buying those other ridiculous razors. And they send it to me. I don't have to think about it. For a limited time, Harry's has an exclusive offer for listeners of my show. New customers can get a Harry's starter set and a free body wash for just $3 at harrys.com/majority. That's an over $16 value for just $3. You get the 5-blade razor, you get the weighted handle, you get the foaming shave gel, a travel cover, and a travel size body wash that apparently has a great texture. It's an incredibly great deal, but act fast while supplies last. Go to harrys.com/majority to redeem your offer.
I'm no longer bringing personal anecdotes into the ads.
I don't know about that.
From now on. Yeah, I can't resist.
You can't make that promise.
Yes, that's true.
Folks, just a reminder, this show relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you do, you get, you not only support the free show, you get the fun half, and you get the rest of the show commercial free. Okay, so in the Senate, the $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid package passed the House last week. It is head to the Senate. They are now in the Senate, essentially negotiating amongst themselves, really amongst the Democrats. We know that we're not going to get any Republican votes. We're more than likely no Republican votes for this. It is being done through the reconciliation process, so they don't need the Republican votes. We know at this point that there is not going to be the minimum wage has been stripped from the bill. And as such, there's another $64 billion in there. Like, they've already set the number at $1.9 trillion. And they have already figured out that it hits all the thresholds when the $64 billion figure I'm talking about is what the Congressional Budget Office scored the cost of the $15 minimum wage. That gets taken out. So there's another $64 billion in there. I don't think we're going to know where that goes until the end of this process. 800-page bill. It's constantly in flux until it gets passed. That's, the nature of this. We do know that there have been reports. And have you heard anything else on this, Emma? I know that it was reported out.
Well, it was then confirmed by NBC that basically Joe Biden has agreed to lowering the cutoff threshold for, or the phase out thresholds, I should say, for the $1,400 checks, even though there's more money to play with right now.
I mean, theoretically. And now, so what does that mean? In the House bill and in the prior $1,200 checks and the $600 checks, the phase out for single filers started at $75,000. So if you're an individual, you're filing on yourself, and you're making $75,000 a year, you're getting a $1,400 check. If you're making $76,000 a year, you're making a little bit less. It sort of tapers off. And the taper goes all the way in those in the House bill to $100,000. If you make $100,000, if you make $99,000, you get a smaller check. I don't know what the algorithm was, but it phased out down to zero at 100,000. Instead of that, Biden has, according to NBC, agreed that at $75,000, it starts to taper down, but the taper is steeper and it ends if you're making $80,000. So if you make $81,000, you may have gotten a diminished $1,400 check under the House bill.
But the point is that also that this is 2019 income for the most part, too, we should say.
Well, it's 2019 or it could be 2020 if you file before this goes out. If you file over the next couple of weeks, correct. And so it is conceivable if you, but nevertheless, in 2019, I mean, this has always been the problem, right? With 2019, if you base it on 2019, obviously, when you get the $1,200 check in March of last year, it made sense to base it on 2019. When you got the $600 check in December, you know, the 2020 is not over. So you really got to, I mean, I don't know how else they would fix that, right? I mean, how else would you establish that? So this is not, now I want to make clear here. When we were worried about this before, we were worried they were going to drop from the $75,000 level and they were going to lower that so that the phase outs would start earlier. But the phase outs don't start earlier. They are steeper and they're just not available to people making over $80,000. Again, 2019 or 2020 if you file, but that I don't know how you escape that problem. And it doesn't implicate that problem, because if you made in 2019 $80,000 in 2019, or I guess if you made $95,000 in 2019 or $81,000 in 2019, and you made significantly less, you lost your job. I mean, then you're in unemployment and you're not going to get that extra check. But that would have been a problem too if you lost your job at $100,000.
Understood. I mean, the way that you alleviate this exact problem that you're talking about is use the monopoly money that you got from the $15 minimum wage being stripped from the bill to cast a wider net as opposed to tailoring it more. There's no reason to tailor it more, especially now that the $15 minimum wage isn't included.
Right. It's a different cohort of people. But yes, I agree with what you're saying. And we should say the phase out begins for $112,000 for head of the household. That is like if you're a father or mother and you are a single wage earner. That now ends at 100. That now ends at 120,000. So that went up. That went up if you're a single wage earner. And the phase out for joint filers ends at 160. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So it used to be, I don't know what it is for the head of the household, but it used to be for joint filers, 150 is when the phase out begins, and it used to end at 200,000, and now it ends at 160. So the people who are making between 161 and 200,000 lose out of some measure of a check. Wouldn't have been $1,400. It would have been diminished. People who are single heads of households, it's now phases out at 120. I don't know what it would have been then, maybe 180, 160 in the old bill, but that's what you get. Higher income and earners. And again, you still have this problem of 2019 versus 2020, but high income earners there, less likely to get the $1,400 check. Now, the difference between this $1,400 check and the $1,200 check and the $600 check, however, is that unlike those previous two payments, adult dependents qualify for this round. So 26 million more Americans will be receiving a $1,400 check, up to 26 million Americans that did not receive the $600 check and did not receive the $1,200 check. And that means college students, that means disabled adults, and that means elderly Americans who are adults living in somebody else's household or essentially a dependent.
Right.
And so in that respect, this is a much better situation, because if you are making if you're the head of a household and you're making $112,000 a year, and you've got to pay for either your college children, or maybe your mother, elderly mother, or your elderly grandmother or grandfather, or an adult who is maybe has is a dependent because of some type of disability or something that they can't work, they can't live on their own. You're now getting an extra $1,400 for that person. And so,
yes, that is, but to my point earlier, though, that all would have been true had these thresholds not been lowered for no reason.
Indeed. And Janet Yellen said it best, like, you can target things, but every time you target, you are missing hidden pockets of pain. And the idea that you're going to be that parsimonious for folks at that income level still. And again,
or just like kingmaker-esque, like a lot of what this is too, in my view, is just this kind of arrogant puppeteer element that we see way too much in the Democratic Party. It's paternalistic too. They would rather be able to target things to such a specific degree as opposed to casting a wider net. And yes, this is still a good bill. I mean, the thing that's underrated too is the $3,600 a year child tax credit that's in here as well.
That's right.
That's kind of akin to something that Romney proposed too, but it's still a good thing. And that's going to be included for families with young children. And I think up to 17 years old, you also get a payment as well. It's just not as large, but still very significant. And I wonder what they're going to do with that extra.
We'll see. I mean, who knows?
$1 billion or whatever it is. That's key.
In January, when the $600 checks hit bank accounts, personal spending increased by 2.4%. This is according to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. And we're now looking at $1,400 per person. And I imagine with 26 million more people being eligible for that extra $1,400, plus the tax credits that you talked about, this is going to make a big, big difference for people. Research apparently done on those on the $1,200 checks saw that most people spent their checks on rent, food, and other essential bills. So this is going to be the biggest payment that people receive. Again, those people who are making over $80,000 through $100,000, they will not see this check. And
we should say too, they've done studies on how those payments affected state tax revenue too. And shockingly, I think the New York Times found that state tax revenue only on average dropped by around 2% or a little under 2% last year. And a lot of that had to do with these payments that were still going back into the economy. And then you also saw states like Florida without income tax really were harmed as well. But largely what it's, these states should be thrilled. What's helping keep their economy afloat are these payments that are going back out. To
a large extent, people, to the extent that, when people got the money, they went out and bought stuff. And that's where, a lot of the revenue is coming from. And so that's pretty huge. We also now, there's a big push. Again, the moderates, so-called moderates, the conservatives, I would call them, in the Democratic Party are going back and they're trying to get him to lower the extension of unemployment benefits, or the expansion, I should say, the federal expansion, right? Like you get your state unemployment benefits, and the last round of expansion of that was $300, was $600 in the CARES Act. The one passed in December was $300 per week. This has $400 per week until August of this year. And Joe Manchin wants it to be $300, of course, because he says, quote, I've been at $300. It's kind of hard to explain why you're getting a bump up now. Suggesting that the higher $400 figure would reduce incentives for people to rejoin the workforce, just as increasing vaccinations are poised to help the economy reopen. We want people to get back to work, Manchin said. It'd be awful for the doors to open up, and there's no one working. You got a lot of customers, no one working. That's the problem. This is just absurd. This is just absurd. Because first off, what would happen is if there was a smaller supply of workers, is that we know that pay would go up. And the idea, what should drive people back to work and drive people into stores should be their sense that they can go and spend their money and they can go and earn their money without risking their lives. The idea that once people get fully vaccinated, they're not going to want to come back to work. Well, there'll be other people who will want to take that work.
There are not enough people at the Johnny Rockets. People aren't going to want to spend money. What is that?
And we know that in the first couple of months of the pandemic, Congress passed a $600 weekly. So how do you justify going down to $300? Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin will Joe Manchin. The other thing that is developing, and we just don't know yet, we just don't know where these things are going to land. It's quite possible that that money that is saved on the narrowing of the elimination of the $15 minimum wage and the narrowing of that threshold, that ramp down for folks who are making over $80,000 or did in 2019, could go into, and this is what's being pushed by at least 10 Democratic senators, automatic stabilizers. In other words, instead of saying we're going to provide these expansions in unemployment through August, or instead of actually putting any date on it, let's tag it, peg it to the number of unemployed in the country. So that if unemployment does not drop below a certain level, we don't have to come back and pass another bill. It just continues until unemployment drops to certain levels. That is also, they're trying to do this with all sorts of relief measures like SNAP. This was a problem even with the HEROES Act, frankly, that the House passed, that they did not include these automatic stabilizers. And these are unemployment insurance, any type of direct payments, anything like that. It would be pegged to how the economy is doing, which makes sense, right? I mean, that's presumably why you go back and provide more insurance. In the Great Recession, this is from a piece of Talking Points memo, making the point that Democratic lawmakers, a bunch of them learned a lesson from then. The Great Recession, this is according to Don Bayer from Virginia on a panel last June, they re-upped unemployment insurance 13 different times. So every time you go to do that, you have to negotiate with either Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, or the Republican Party, or frankly, Mark Warner or whomever in the Democratic Party. And the way you avoid that is you say, like, we're going to take it out of our hands. We know why we're providing this aid. It's because you have X number of millions of people unemployed. Well, if it drops below X number of million people, then we stop. And if it doesn't, then it just continues. So we'll see. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they'll be able to get that into the bill. We will see. But these are the big questions right now. But you should also know that there's something $60 billion, I think it was, for things like subsidies for childcare. And there's a lot of good things in this bill that I think we're going to see the benefits from. You know, the worst thing about the CARES Act was how much it waived. The problem wasn't so much that ordinary people, that the vast majority of people did not get the support they needed. It was very helpful in terms of dealing with poverty and keeping people above water. The problem was that everybody was driving under a yellow flag, but they whipped the green flag for corporations. So what ends up happening is one of the fundamental problems with our economic system is that it creates massive wealth disparity. And that happened over the course of this pandemic, where you have billionaires making billions more dollars over the course of just this pandemic. Over the course of the past year may have been the best year that Jeff Bezos ever had. Certainly probably was. And it's true of a bunch of other billionaires and multimillionaires. A lot of people made a ton of cash because corporations were basically told, we've got free money for you. We're going to backstop. You want to borrow money. You want to expand. You want to buy other things. You want to continue to amass concentrations of wealth and power. We got you covered. And that
the
was
CARES Act basically socialized the stock market for the most part.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It, well, at least it socialized it in terms of what it provided a small number of people, but all the benefits are still privatized.
Yes, of course. That's, I mean, the stock market is pretty much, for the most part, only accessed by elite people, and the benefits were seen by the very elite people. So quite American in that regard, in terms of at least the hierarchy. There's still tiers in the elites. So child care centers in this bill will receive approximately $40 billion. Now, of course, they've been devastated in the way, because people were not sending their kids to childcare. But this is going to provide, this is going to go above and beyond for what to just maintain to keep these things from going out of business. I mean, this is going to be, this could have a significant influence on the provision of childcare in this country for low-income people. So, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of benefits that come out of this bill that we can't fully sort of like parse at the moment, because it's massive. And we're talking about a massive amount of money. People are going to remember that in that CARES Act, $2 trillion of that CARE Act, it was a $3 trillion bill. $2 trillion of that was actually just sort of a loaning provision that was backed up only by $500 billion that the Treasury Department had. So it earmarked $500 billion for the Treasury Department that essentially act as like, as capital reserves for the Fed to loan. So that money, that was not money that went out to people. This $1.9 trillion is going to end up in the hands of more Americans than any other bill that has passed at this point. And so it's going to be more widely distributed. And there's a $15 minimum wage, never mind in the context of COVID, it was well overdue 4 years ago, never mind today. And so the real issue with the $15 minimum wage, in my mind, has less to do with COVID and more to do with this was an opportunity, because I will go to my grave believing that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema were not going to vote against the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill because the $15 minimum wage was in there. 100%.
And, but we won't know in this instance. Maybe, who knows, pick up a couple of seats in 2022. I don't know what those seats will be.
I don't know. I mean, I think the fight for 15 continues next reconciliation bill.
Right. And there will be 2 more reconciliation bills, or there can be, over the next 2 years. So we will get a sense as to how that will happen. In New York State, and we'll keep you up to date on that, obviously, New York State, greater calls for Andrew Cuomo to resign. protests throughout the state over the past day or two. And we will see. The investigation will begin on Cuomo, and we'll see if more women come out.
And he lost that fight where he tried to appoint someone very closely associated with his closest advisor to be the independent figure overseeing the investigation. I find it quite amusing. It reminds me of what actually the Washington football team did with their sexual harassment allegations, where they hired a lawyer paid by the owner to look into the sexual harassment allegations from inside the house. I mean, it's common practice in order to kind of quell PR concerns. And so we saw Cuomo try to get away with it. Tish James, New York Attorney General, said, I'm going to appoint someone myself. She has, I will say, just from a purely horse race political perspective, positioned herself quite nicely for a governor's run in 2022. First, by coming out ahead of Cuomo on these nursing home numbers, where she basically said that Cuomo had obscured the data and hidden the half of nursing home deaths that he did hide, allegedly. And then, of course, she's also going to be overseeing this investigation into the sexual harassment and assault allegations, really. I mean, the kissing forcibly is assault into Andrew Cuomo. And so, I think should someone like Cynthia Nixon not run again, I think Letitia James has set herself up quite nicely.
We'll see. Meanwhile, this is from the Strand. She'd be the first woman governor in the state. And this is from the Strand. Brendan has this tweet from the Strand. So inside the Strand bookstore. The Cuomo book has been moved from its previous floor spot, notable nonfiction, to the New York history rows. So I don't know what that foretells. All right, let's move into this. There was oral arguments yesterday in front of the Supreme Court. And one of the big concerns, one of the things that we've been dealing with in this country for 7-8 years now has been the Supreme Court's attack on the Voting Rights Act. Particularly, they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby case, which was, like I say, about 8 years ago now. And Section 5 was the pre-clearance. You had 16 counties around the country. I think it was in 13 states. 2 of the counties were in New York City, or bordering New York City. And these were counties that over the course of the years showed racism in their attempts to, or their attempts to change voting laws were racist. They were trying to prevent either immigrants or other minorities from voting. Obviously, Black people largely. And there are 2 cases that were argued and combined yesterday in the Supreme Court. 2 Arizona laws that
just a coincidence that this comes after Arizona turns blue for the first time in a presidential race in 24 years.
These are laws that I think were passed before that, but they know what's coming. I mean, they're doing this all across the country, but yes. And this is one of those situations where the outcome, the ruling is like who wins is less significant than how they win, because there are still existing provisions of the Voting Rights Act. Specifically, there are 2 different sort of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act basically provides 2 different types of protections for voters, and ostensibly against discrimination. If you can show that a law was passed with racist intent to prevent a minority group from voting, that was the intent, then that law should be struck down. Now, of course, over the years, Republicans, but also some happen with Democrats, have become more sophisticated in the way that they fashion laws to restrict voting. So in other words, they don't necessarily say like, well, we want to prevent black people from voting, so we're going to say can't have black people vote, or other ham-fisted ways. You can also, supposedly, Section 2 protects on the results. If the results are racist, even if the intent wasn't.
As determined by, too, now, though, the Supreme Court, if these results are racist in these two cases.
Well, that has always been the problem with the results test. Because,
and I just want to say these two cases really quickly, just to point out, because I heard this on PBS and I thought this was really important. One of the cases requires voting officials to discard ballots if they're cast in the wrong precinct. And in Arizona, say you're cutting down on a bunch of polling locations. Oftentimes, voting happens in a big gymnasium and there's multiple lines in terms of precincts. Say you get in the wrong line, cast your ballot in the wrong line. No one tells you, which could definitely happen based on who's being hired to oversee these elections in these states. Thrown out. And then the second one prohibits ballot collection, which particularly affects indigenous communities, rural communities where they don't have access to the post office. Say you give someone comes by and says, let me collect your ballot. This has been deemed legal in many states, and then drops them off en masse at a location in the post office. That would be illegal now. So that completely eliminates people who may be disabled, people who may be elderly, who aren't able to go out and vote and don't have someone to take their ballot to the ballot box for them, et cetera. And also, of course, indigenous communities, as well, as I mentioned. So that's primarily what these cases are discussing.
These two laws. And then the question is like, are the results of this, are they racist? And are they racist? And the test of the results is really the issue. Because it's one thing to say like, okay, the fact is that we know that the percentage of people who cast ballots in the wrong precincts is higher amongst minority communities. And part of it could be a function of you have election officials who will close one precinct and move people to another, or people don't have, the same access to transportation, or they, minority communities, maybe they tend to be, they put two different ballot locations in the same physical place, two different districts, whatever it is. And so the question is like, how do you measure results? And there are a couple of cases that essentially provide this test. You have to determine whether such social and historical conditions exist, or that there are other, it's actually 9 factors. The extent of any history of official discrimination in the state, the extent to which voting in elections of the state or political subdivision is racially polarized, on and on. And it is a very sort of messy, subjective test.
Subjective is key.
Yes.
Because we know who's making these determinations. Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, among others.
What was very dangerous about this case, and it hasn't been resolved, but there are people who are encouraged by the line of questioning yesterday, was that the Arizona Republican Party's brief and the Brnovich brief were arguing for a new type of test. Instead of this one that is, subjective, but has, some substantiation in the law, they wanted to apply a test where the plaintiff, that is the people who have been disenfranchised, must show that the law causes, quote, a substantial disparity in minority voters' opportunity to vote and to elect their preferred candidates. Substantial. Now, the problem is like, well, what does substantial mean? It also, that the plaintiff, this is the person who has been disenfranchised, must prove that the election law caused this disparity. So did a law that says that if you cast in the wrong precinct, does that necessarily mean that there is a disparity in the ability necessarily for minorities to cast their ballot? Now, this is their proposal, and the fear that a lot of legal experts had would that this would be adopted, that the 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, 6, would adopt this test because it places such a high burden on the plaintiff to prove that it effectively makes the law virtually non-existent. And fortunately, it seemed like it was a bridge too far for 5 of the justices. Obviously, we
don't know yet.
Well, we don't know, but I'm just going off of the reporting that folks like Ian Millhiser and
I heard it was still unclear, so I don't know, but I'm trying not to.
We can't know.
I'm a little stitious, so.
No, we can't know. But people have cited Elena Kagan's hypotheticals questions to the lawyer for the Arizona Republican Party. Imagine a state cancels Sunday early voting, she told Carvin, even though Black people are 10 times more likely to vote on Sundays than white voters, because Black voters tend to have a we have this as a clip.
We have that clip. Yeah,
let's play this.
A state has long had 2 weeks of early voting, and then the state decides that it's going to get rid of Sunday voting on those 2 weeks, leave everything else in place. Black voters vote on Sunday 10 times more than white voters. Is that system equally open?
I would think it would be, because let's think about it. Sunday is the day that we traditionally close government offices. It would be the exception rather than the rule to have government workers come in on a Sunday.
It's an exception to have government workers come in on a Saturday too. That's not a real problem.
Well, I mean, there are Sunday closing laws, as we know from McGowan v. Maryland, which are different than Saturday. But in all events, Saturday would implicate other religions.
So that is equally open. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Do we have more clips? Because she goes on to offer a bunch of hypotheticals, and suddenly the lawyer for the Arizona Republican Party realizes, like, oh, wait a second, this test may not work. Do we have the rest of it, Brendan, where she says about the country club?
Not the country club, but we have the clip where she talks about Black voters.
Play that.
Yeah.
The state says we're going to have election day voting only, and it's going to be from 9 to 5. And there's plenty of evidence on the record that voters of won races are 10 times more likely to work a job that wouldn't allow them to vote during that time period. Is that system equally open?
Seems like it, because that would be pretty much the status quo in 1982. And of course, if it was 8 to 7, you could make the same argument about.
How about 9 to 3?
I think any time you diminish from what I will call the usual burdens, if you went to 15 minutes, to use an extreme example, then obviously you're effectively denying.
So 9 to 5 is okay, but 10 to 4 would not be okay? Is that the idea?
Again, these are all hypotheticals that have never existed in the real world.
This seems like, this doesn't seem so fanciful to me. States are doing
may or may not be.
9 to 5 is okay, 10 to 3 is not. Is that the idea?
Again, it's a sliding scale, and I think the farther you get from the normal hours that were extant in 1982, the much more suspicious it becomes. If you want to
Justice
Gorsuch?
I mean, think of this guy arguing the constitutionality of trying to diminish the opportunity for people to vote and saying, well, in 1982, 9 to 5 was the norm, so we should just apply that now just because.
Dolly Parton told us to.
Exactly. And of course, there's plenty of data that show that will inhibit who votes. And in fact, that the story of the man who died, whose daughter found his records, the Republican godfather of gerrymandering. He had crunched all these numbers and basically was showing Republicans how to structure their laws and to gerrymander in such a way that you would diminish the power of the vote for non-white people. And that ended up being revealed in the course of the case about the census. The bottom line is there is some reason to believe, more than there was 2 days ago, that the Voting Rights Act lives for another day. Some of this stuff can be fixed statutorily, and that's what H.R. 1 and S1 purport to do in some instances, is fix some of the things that the Supreme Court has begun to attack in the Voting Rights Act.
Which is why Republicans are going to kill it DOA, dead on arrival, because
unless
Mitch McConnell's life's work is putting people on the Supreme Court like Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and all, in order to literally do that. Keep Republican status quo in order to prevent people from voting and more.
Democrats can pass it if they get rid of the filibuster.
They won't.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. So just a moment left here. Neera Tanden's nomination was withdrawn last night. And yesterday, we heard this report that at the very least, Lisa Murkowski was floating the idea that, like, hey, if you let me drill in Anwar, maybe I'll vote for Neera Tanden. Good for Joe Biden. For
good
saying,
trade-off.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, what's interesting about this is Joe Manchin obviously sunk Tanden's nomination. I don't particularly think that someone's nomination should be sunk on the basis of tweets from the left. I would have other reasons to oppose Neera Tanden's nomination. What's interesting, though, is there was no, because she had alienated the left so determinedly, really, over the years, in many different ways, both by deed and by words. There was no one really to fight for her nomination. They could not rally people to pressure anybody, and that was the story. It was Manchin that killed it. And obviously, some of the Republicans, because they're going to vote, some of the Republicans are going to vote for some of Biden's nominees, without a doubt. But there was nobody to fight. And that's a lesson, I think, that the Democratic Party needs to learn. It's, in many respects, it is an old story. Well, we'll talk more about this tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Just kidding.
Right. We're still here. All right, folks, we're going to head into the fun half of the program. We've got,
I hurt my back pretty bad, Sam. I feel like you.
You did?
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
Working out.
Oh, well, I didn't do it working out. I did it sleeping. That's the difference.
That's a workout for your subconscious.
Yeah, exactly.
I went too high on the kettlebell, and my whole lower back is shot depending on how I sit. So.
Oh, geez, you got to be careful about that.
I know. Anyway.
All right, folks. Don't forget, this show relies on your support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you support this free show, and you get the fun half, and you get the free show free of commercials. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. It's great coffee. And check out the AM Quickie. Sample it. See if you like it. 7 minutes in the morning. Get your headlines. Completely free. You can find it at amquickie.com. amquickie.com. Brendan tells me that Monmouth poll just came out. Forgiving $10,000 of student debt polls at 61%. Forgiving $50,000 polls at 45%. Interesting. Don't forget to check out Nomi's show. Not sure who is on today. You guys know? You can find it at youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show or twitch.tv /the_Nomi Key Show. Oh, Nomi Key.
No. _
show.
Yeah.
Also, check out the Antifada. They'll be talking to Professor Toussaint Louzier and Bradley Green of the Chicago Black Panther Party, a contemporary of Fred Hampton's, about Judas and the Black Messiah. That is a new movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing that. Also, Matt, what's happening on the Matt Leck Enterprises?
Oh, yeah. Still go check out my interview from last week's Left Reckoning with Peter Lindbaugh on the commons enclosure and climate change and how it's basically all been going wrong since, and why 1802 particularly was a pivotal year for, the mess we're in now.
1802 was?
Yeah, 1802 particularly, because the Haitian Revolution had the reaction to that had sort of solidified. You have a lot of interesting stuff going on in 1802. Coal was starting to be used a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, head into the fun half.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them. Almost says what?
What?
Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. are black, 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 black African, and the alpha males are back, 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 and the Africans are black, 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 black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. My birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy. Pussy, 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 pussy.
Muted.
We are going to be a little, we're going a little short today, folks. So I don't know if we'll take any phone calls today. Let me read this. IM. My defense of Biden throughout the election was that crumbs are better than nothing. And now even crumbs are too much. Not making a stupid red-brown argument. I just don't see how we can even pretend this party can be a vehicle for anything progressive. This is how they act when they're in power. Even looking forward to the next election seems hopeless with Jamie Harrison, who managed to lose to Senator Paul Lynn because he forgot to run Facebook ads already set up. At least with Obama, they had the meager ACA to point to. Now it seems even the meager accomplishments are too much to ask for. Tell me I'm wrong and give me some hope, Sam and Emma. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels like he's staring into the abyss. I mean, I look, let me just set stipulate that, when you talk about crumbs, right? Like what I can't understand is why people don't have the ability to continue to engage in pushing the Democrats and recognize that they are at best like a moderate party, but also realize that there is at least a wedge to get more progressive policies. You're not going to get rid of markets with the Democrats. You're not going to get, I think, you're not going to get, at least in the short run, the decommodification of the necessities that I think that people need to live. But crumbs, I mean, there's $1,400 check. I mean, there's $1,400 check. We know the implications of what the $1,200 checks did. There's $1,400 checks. Should it be 2,000? Just as a political matter, it should be. I don't know what the actual number is. We have some Democrats who are pushing for repeated payments. I mean, I think throughout this whole thing, we should have had repeated payments until the day that, the number of deaths that we have because of coronavirus is less than the number of deaths that we get with the flu.
Also, Sam, I just wanted to quickly point out something from the earlier show that dovetails into your argument about the checks. Like the $600 payment that people got, do we know, based on these proposed, I doubt we do, but based on these proposed steeper drop-offs, if they're how many millions will have gotten that $600 payment and not the $1,400 payment?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because that's
right,
cutting off your nose to spite nobody. That's a constituency who could vote in 2022.
Can I just make a point? And I think there are important differences that it should be differentiated from crumbs, but to the extent that what the IMer is saying is true, and I agree that what's happening is shamefully inadequate. It's good. It's at least the Democrats are empowered to take this flack now, rather than the 4 years of Trump, where they could pretend like they were different. That was, from my perspective, I I think it's important for them not to be able to hide behind a reactionary party that has like some sort of democratic imprimatur to do horrible things. Now, when the horrible things are done, we actually get a sense of what the American ruling elite want done. So like that's the reason to vote for Democrats, not because they're really going to improve things, but that things get laid bare. Obama laid things bare when he was president.
That's the whole argument that, Hillary Clinton would have been a much better foil for the left than Donald Trump.
We could have been making these realizations 4 years ago.
Exactly. And, in the meantime, still going to be $1.9 trillion put into the economy. You're still going to have, at least, from a Band-Aid perspective, right? There's nothing structural that's going on here. I mean, maybe daycare centers will be helped for a while. There's nothing structural that's going on here. Nothing. And even like, there's nothing systemic that's going on here. It's a one-off. Maybe you get those automatic stabilizers, which I think that is, that at least has, is outside of the realm of, if you can muster the votes, but there's nothing structural that's going to happen here. At the same time, there is actual desperate need by people to get money. And there are people who have been crushed by this. And this is going to help. Is it sufficient? I mean, not when it runs out, it won't be. In the meantime, it is at the very least going to provide some help. We need, we obviously need more in terms of like debt forgiveness on rent. You need debt forgiveness on college debt. You need, just in terms of like just COVID relief. But structurally, nothing's happened here. But in terms of like COVID relief, this is not bad, in my estimation. With that said, there's a whole host of other things that need to happen, and COVID is a good opportunity for those things to happen. And, Bernie lost. Anybody who thought that Joe Biden was going to, implement structural change is wrong. But anybody who thought that you were going to get Barack Obama, where you would have 3 million foreclosures 4 years after this crisis, or Barack Obama, where you would start to see them pitching cuts in Social Security, also wrong. And that's not necessarily a function of the individuals, Barack Obama and Joe Biden. It's a function of the era and how much progressives are pushing. The idea that there's no talk of austerity, right? That the best that the Republicans can say is, it seems a little excessive. That there's no serious talk of austerity. That when it comes to this idea of limiting of narrowing who gets the checks, that it's happening on the high end rather than the low end. If your income in 2019, if dropped off the floor in 2020, you're screwed. But you're screwed regardless of what you were making in 2019. If you're above the threshold, so.
I just wanted to answer that question really quick because Jeff Stein tweeted out that 12 million fewer adults and 5 million fewer children will receive the benefit based on.
So there you have it. And ostensibly, unless they get their taxes in, they're still making, you're still talking about families making, if it's a family dependence, you're still talking about like, $112,000. And that $1,400, you're making $35,000, that $1,400 is going to mean a lot more to you than if you're making $112,000.
And just the political point too of a check being received to those 12 million adults under Trump, and then them not getting that completed $1,400 payment. It was already weaselly framing by Joe Biden.
I'm looking at this politically. There's a whole host of other things that are, I think, huge mistakes. Like the $2,000 is a huge mistake politically. but I'm talking about in terms of the impact it's going to have on people's lives in the near term. You also have another 24 million who are getting checks this time because they're
I get it. I
dependents.
get it. I think it's a good bill. I just like I'm now watching these negotiations that are
Yeah, it sucks.
like what? For what? We
You
talk
know-
about those moderates already going to be, they were going to vote for the bill if there was $15 minimum wage in there. You think they weren't going to vote for the bill if the income threshold, the cliff wasn't a little bit steeper for the
Chuck
drop off?
Schumer should be holding the line. Joe Biden should be holding the line, but Joe Biden doesn't have a line. That's the thing. See, I don't think he has a line to hold.
No. I mean, his line is just kind of like love and happiness in the Democratic Party, man. Like that's kind of what he stands for.
Yep. So limiting the benefit results in savings $12 billion. I mean, it is like, it's absurd as a political matter, right? As a political matter, it is absurd because it's nothing. It is completely exactly what you said in terms of like these people posturing.
Who does this serve?
This is like Mark Warner going back and, it is again, these people's like their brand. Like I am a fiscal, like I'm responsible. There are people living.
But like, if it's responsible, this is like screwing over like upper middle class people ultimately who like, have gone to Democrats in recent years.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the constituency that they built. They decided they wanted to be a party that appealed more to suburbanites and upper middle class folks. And now they're going to screw over them too.
I mean, I would imagine, like, I don't understand what the motivation for, whatever, how many it was, 10 senators who go to Biden and say, we want to do this, right? That's what it is, right? It's like 10 senators, maybe it's 3 senators, maybe it's Joe Manchin. I don't know. The problem is like, who's going to be the one who says like, well, wait a second. No, I want to give up the dependents for that. You could give up the dependents, the adult dependents, wasn't in the other 2 bills. Nobody would notice. We would never talk about it. I mean, right? Like nobody would IM and say, hey, adult dependents. Maybe one person would because they experience it. But that in terms of like materially helping people, if you have an adult dependent and you've got to provide for them housing, food, and you're making $50,000, that $1,400 is going to be more relevant to you than it will be for someone making between $80,000 and $100,000. And it's not even $1,400, right? If you're making over 75, you're getting less than $1,400, whatever it is, $1,000. If you're making, $90,000. I mean, the bottom line is like, these are the things, and I'm only responding to this guy saying like, we're not even getting crumbs. No, you're getting crumbs. You're not getting like any type of meaningful structural change. And they're like the $15 minimum wage that would have been provided some, at least, not systemic, but within the system, structural change to the, where you would have people who are not working and still unable to pay for, basic necessities. And this, what is missed from this is the opportunity to do that. The $15 hour systemic crumb. I don't know. I mean, I just like you want, if you want encouragement, that's the best I can do.
I think a lot of what Sam is saying is correct. I won't tell you what I think is incorrect because I just like want you to feel insecure. But
I mean, I think the desire to think like it might be possibly better if, the Democrats lost because it sucks, right? Like the amount of sort of unspoken vetoes that like the Mark Warner type gets in this party, it's completely like appalling and world threatening, and it's not going to be enough. And like, that's the only thing I can say is like, it's better when they're in power so you can actually see that happening, and instead of them fundraising off of the orange man.
And it also is why, like, in my mind, I mean, look, this is the situation. And the question is like, how do you deal with it? And I think that like, it is important to feel, to be aware, like Matt is saying, the failures of the Democratic Party and the limitations of the Democratic Party. You need to be able to see that clearly so that you can see like, where the points are to push. I mean, the fact is that there just is not a viable third party option. And it's like, you look at numbers like this with the 45% of people say forgive 50% at the polls. Like, you're not going to get, and that's like when it's just sort of just, there's no complication in that question. Do you agree with giving $50,000 debt relief to people? This is not like, like a Medicare for all question. And like maybe the way you phrase it, and if you tell them about the increase in taxes, but if you explain that your out of pocket expenses are going to be, that's pretty straightforward. If you can't get more than 45% for that, it's going to be really hard to get a third party that is going to promote something like that. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And unless you get a party where there is like a bigger constituency, a bigger number of people like, members of the squad, who are going to leverage it, but they need to have more power. That's just the bottom line. I mean,
So I think, the silver lining is, one, as I mentioned at the top of the show, like, you should be very excited that lots of fewer people are going to die based on this vaccine distribution model, right? And the $1.9 trillion stimulus package, have they named it, by the way? American Rescue Act. Huh?
I didn't know. I know what the name was.
American Rescue Act, I think. It's a good bill. It's a very good bill. I mean, as much as we're talking about the needless, punching in the face, there is a good bill that's coming down the pike. And as we've provided you with information, if you lost your job in 2020, file your taxes ASAP so that you can get, and you were basically above those income thresholds, right? Most of our quibbles, I think, about this needling has to do with the politics of it. I think the people that are most in need of relief are still going to get the relief that they need, but it's Democrats, I think, electorally sabotaging themselves for reasons that are based in office politics, more than anything. And as Sam likes to say, personal branding for very specific senators who we constantly have to cater to.
Yeah.
But again, like, there are good things happening. So that's really, and then, we go all hands on deck for next reconciliation package, including $15 minimum wage and a lot of these priorities. I think, then there's a conversation about healthcare that has to be had. Then there's a conversation about green energy infrastructure that has to be had. A lot of these things were just in the first few months, and the public is more educated on the whole right now.
And I think there's a broader
more engaged.
Yes. Keith from Manhattan. I'm a graduate student in public policy, and there's a ton of emphasis on ensuring, quote, people who don't deserve need the benefits in democratic thinking. Can't have a high moral hazard or dead weight loss. It's the same argument they make against tuition-free college. Why would we let rich people benefit? It drives me crazy in the limits of the scope of this programs and ideas. Well, first, I want to distinguish something. When they say, why would we let rich people benefit when it comes to free college? That is a fig leaf. That's just a lie. It's not an example of what you said earlier. The moral hazard or dead weight loss is also focused on people who are living in lower income. There is a general notion, I think, like they do something like that ramp down at $75,000 to $100,000 so that they can justify maybe now, the other end, so that their brand is like, look at me. I'm not just somebody who just says moral hazard for people, low income people. I'm also moral hazard for people who are like, making $75,000 to $100,000. I think that's sort of what's going on there, but that's true. But I also think that there is a growing sense, particularly in younger people, that like the reason why you have government is to provide certain basic necessities for people, at least. And it really comes down to the, commodifying things. It was an interesting exchange between Anand Giridharadas and Elizabeth Warren the other day that I found interesting. And maybe we'll put a link to it. Giridharadas says, you've called yourself a proud capitalist, albeit a reformist one, and one who's not popular with other capitalists sometimes. What do you say to the growing number of Americans, especially younger ones? And Warren says, can I stop you there and say, when you say not popular with other capitalists, I'm not popular with folks who are very wealthy and think they should make more money being subsidized by other taxpayers. I'm just having fun with you, but I really want to make that point. A lot of these folks are not capitalists. They're all for competitive markets for someone else, but they would like to live in America where they're getting the tax breaks, they're getting all the subsidies, where their employees are supported through public dollars to pay for their health care and food and housing, where the owners of these businesses don't have to pay a living wage. So I throw that in. Sorry to distract you, though. And then Giordano says, no, actually, I think that's a very important point. It gets to the question I'm asking, which is, I think a growing number of younger Americans say that maybe that viewpoint is confusing a feature for a bug. In other words, what if capitalism itself, its inherent logic, not the distortion of it, that is the problem behind this economy, this wealthy disparity, this planetary emergency? What if it's a system that fundamentally elevates money, the pursuit of money over the pursuit of all else? And that's the question to ask there, right? Like, that is the fundamental question. Can capitalism be reformed, or is it systemically problematic, leading to the abuses, what you call abuses of capitalism, are actually sort of like inherent in capitalism? And she says, I don't see it that way. Let me explain, try and explain a little bit. I believe that at its best, we have a system that works with markets, and markets can produce a lot of value, but only markets with rules. Markets without rules are theft. And so confusing markets without rules and markets that are not real competitive markets with what passes for capitalism in many parts of the world today is missing the central element. And the reason I think this is so important is that this is where we get into the discussion, for example, about socialism. So what's your alternative to a market-based system, a system in which the government decides the allocations of goods and services? Because the problem you run into there is that the same bigotry and prejudice and lust for power that can infect a capitalist system can affect any other system as well. This is about the need for vigilance in our rules and why we need rules that are fair and consistently enforced. If we do that, markets will produce great value and great opportunity for our people. If we don't have their rules, replacing market part of the system is not going to help. Now, then, I wish there was a follow-up to this question, because in this country, at least, right, the number of people who identify as socialists, let's say, who want to get rid of markets, I'm unclear on that. Like, for instance, Jamie, obviously, she's a communist, wants to get rid of markets. But the question then becomes, like, what happens in that sort of ground in between there? Because in my thinking, there should be some sectors where we get rid of markets, where certain things should be decommodified. I don't think there should be a market for providing health insurance, let's say.
Or energy markets.
Or energy. I think we should nationalize the energy grid. I think we should do that as well for the internet. I imagine I could come up with a couple others. I think that we should, but I do think it's okay to have market for, soda.
Well, the point that Bhaskar always makes is, like, markets have existed long before the era of capitalism. And, I tend to agree too. I think, like, in a socialist future, we could still have, like, podcasts, but maybe that's a bit self-serving.
I think we should be able to have podcasts.
Only podcasts.
Yeah, the only currency can go towards funding media projects.
Yeah, I think that we should be in charge of the rulemaking process and rig it towards podcasting. But again, that Warren quote, though, is indicative of the exact schism we saw on the left when it came to
without a doubt. But
Burn
the
Bernie.
problem is because it's so binary. That's where the schism comes. Because I don't know that everybody who's putting snake emojis up there are talking about getting rid of markets. I mean,
No,
I
they're
don't,
not. Many of them were, like door fans who were sexist. I mean, but
well, yes, but I mean, but right.
Well, even others would say there's going to be some intervening stages before we actually we're not going to start with, say, no markets.
Well, I mean, but put aside, yes, obviously there's going to be a transition, but the real question is like, where do we land? And
I mean, I think Bernie's the compromise position, and that's why I support. I support more of Bernie Sanders's perspective, which is a mixed market economy.
Right.
I mean, that's the solution.
It's unclear to me. Like, that's why I would have liked, in the case of Warren, I would like to pin that down more, because she just moves all the way to a command and control system of government, period. And what happens between there and where we are now is rather large, right? Bernie's on that spectrum. I'm just curious as to, where she is. I mean, I imagine she is, to the right of Bernie on that spectrum, but
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
100%.
I would just add that, like, it's harmful to conflate capitalism and markets, because the truth is capitalism has never existed without a labor force to extremely, extremely exploit. And so, like, I'm less, even philosophically, what she's saying about, like, okay, if you redistribute all wealth in an equitable way, maybe markets could be good then, but who are you going to coerce to do the actual work? Because that's the thing that's been hidden by capitalism all along.
right. That's exactly. Because, and we can't find that clip, but I know that he said it. Greenspan said, part of his job was to create anxiety amongst the workforce, right? I mean,
Yeah.
certainly some folks would show up for work, but
It would be like truly free labor in the sort of like Reconstruction era sense. Like, you don't have to do this because you're hungry or need shelter. You're doing this because you want to contribute your labor to a project, which is like the ideal form of work, I think.
I mean, I think, from my perspective, I just wish that Geerdatis had sort of like keyed in on that. He moved on to a different topic, but I would have liked to like get her to explicate, like,
Well, she's not. I mean, she's a lot more on the Reich side of things. Like, this was kind of a lot of the feedback we got based on our interview with Robert Reich, right? Where it's like the problem are the rules set by capitalism as opposed to like something inherent in the system itself. And, even Bernie's too far right for some people when talking about. But again, I think that's a very niche group.
I would like
in American
at
politics.
one point in the interview with Jonathan Cohn the other day, I would like to hear his perspective. Like, at one point he almost touched on this, and we didn't have really time to go into, because I wanted to talk about the nature of his book, but why employers like to provide healthcare, and why, like, even in the HEROES Act, right? You could expand Medicare. Instead, they did the far more costly, and it's going to be in this bill too, I think, an expansion of COBRA. So from the receiving end of, if you're getting health insurance, you're unemployed, the cost may be no different than it was when you were employed, right? For health insurance, because they're a subsidized COBRA, but it's going to cost the U.S. government a lot more. I think the reason why we have the system we have is because big, employers, not all, I mean, like, that's not my agenda, but is it part of that healthcare, at least they perceive it as a mechanism of control. It is one more thing that you as an employee have to deal with if you go and leave your job. You have to find new healthcare. Maybe maybe you can't find it, but just even the act of finding it is a pain in the ass. I mean, like, it maintains a certain amount of employee anxiety to keep you in a job. And that is systemic. Like, what happens if you get rid of that? And, if you've lived in other countries that have a healthcare system like that, you can see it. Like there's a lot of people who are just like, I'm not, I'm not so worried about work. I lose the job, because my healthcare. I mean, frankly, like, I think Australia's changed a little bit, but I spent about a year there, it was 30 years ago now, close, more. But my experience of Australians, and like I say, I think that's changed a little bit, was that people worked to live as opposed to live to work. And that's it's an upgrade. I don't know if it's fully there, but it's an upgrade. And I also used their healthcare system. I went in, $20. See a doctor. That was it. $20.
See what I put in our G chat?
What is this?
Cuomo denies touching anybody inappropriately and says he won't resign.
All right, let's see that. And what's the Daily Caller one?
I'm not exactly sure because I can't listen when we're on air. But
Cuomo?
Yeah, both are Cuomo. I guess maybe play the first one because I'm not sure if the first one says he from the
All right,
recount.
let's play this.
All right, yeah, I'll intro it real quick. Just breaking news: Andrew Cuomo says he won't resign despite allegations against him. Wrong one. No? Oh, no, it's right. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be telling you anything about the soundboard.
I fully support a woman's right to come forward. And I think it should be encouraged in every way. I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable. It was unintentional, and I truly and deeply apologize for it. I feel awful about it.
Oh, God.
And frankly, I am embarrassed by it.
I'm crying.
That's not easy to say, but
Sounds
that's
like a
the
Muppet.
truth.
I'm going.
But this is what I want you to know,
sounds
and I
like
want you
I'm
to know this from me
breaking
directly. I never touched anyone inappropriately. I never
Except for that
touched
picture
anyone
of me grabbing
inappropriately.
that woman I just met by.
I never knew
saying kiss me.
at the time that I was making anyone feel uncomfortable. I never knew at the time I was making anyone feel uncomfortable.
Oh, that's fine then.
And I certainly never, ever meant to offend anyone or hurt anyone.
Or drive multiple reporters out of the business with bullying.
Yeah, and also that second clip is when he says he won't resign if we want to play that. But
Yeah, just pop that up.
yeah. The Daily Caller one, unfortunately.
What? Go ahead.
With all these couple of days calling for your resignation from some Democrats, certainly not all Democrats, but some Democrats, is today, since you've been gone for about a week, is this your way of saying, I'm certainly not resigning?
Yeah. Dave, look, some politicians will always play politics, right?
I
That's
won't.
the
I
nature
don't
of the
do
beast. I don't think today is a day for politics. I wasn't elected by politicians. I was elected by the people of the state of New York. I'm not going to resign. I work for the people of the state of New York. They elected me, and I'm going to serve the people of the state of New York. And by the way, we have a full plate.
All right. Yeah. You know what's interesting? I mean, I'm not convinced that he is like, sort of the idea in his office is like, we're going to go out there and we're going to address this and we're going to make this the story because that way we don't have to talk about the nursing homes.
Oh, well, they both came all at once. So I think the the easier one to deflect is certainly the allegations by women that he can't necessarily, like there's no documentation about it. Notice though how his crying Muppet voice was gone in that second clip though.
Well, he regained his composure. I mean,
Right,
he was
right.
it was really brought down. You
like-
know, he had that moment of self-reflection where he realized, like, I'm not a great guy in that respect.
You know, we sit through when we cover stories like this, a lot of apologies, right? And a lot of public apologies and people trying to ostensibly make amends, but it's really just a PR push. Always focus on how the apologizer centers themselves or not. Cuomo is talking purely about his intentions. That centers himself and what he chose to do, right? And his behavior. Not the way, really, that women felt. And not his actions and the results of them. And so, yeah, a lot of times people don't intend to do certain things, but the results are what they are. You apologize for the damage done, not what you intended to do, because that gives yourself unnecessary grace. And so, yeah, the denial is frustrating. The narcissistic nature of an apology or whatever that was is frustrating. And again, you have to acknowledge the results of your actions and remove your intentions from it, because that is all about you.
But Emma, he said he was sorry that these women were so uptight.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the apology where it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, I'm sorry you felt weirded out when I'm a 63-year-old governor and I'm trying to sleep with and asking if I could kiss.
He apologized for them not wanting to sleep with him.
Yeah.
So I mean, okay.
So he's not resigning. So
well, he's not resigning yet. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if more comes out. I mean, you know, with a guy like Andrew Cuomo, there's a lot of intimidation that goes on. A lot of people, I would imagine, that, you know, the potential for there to be women who are still involved in some fashion or another, relying on state government, either directly or, you know, because they run some other organization, I imagine is, you know, it's a tough thing to do. And you got to, I think there's a lot of people who are like, let me put this, there's the potential that there could be people out there thinking, if he's not going down, I can't afford to do this. And
well, yeah, because of the way that he treats people and
Exactly.
how he runs New York. But the thing about it is that there needs to be not just an investigation into his sexual assault allegations, and I understand, right? Like, the federal government is looking into the COVID deaths and the obfuscation there, but I don't understand how charges aren't being immediately filed based on what we've heard from whistleblowers.
well, they're gonna investigate. We'll see.
I don't know.
All right, I just got a little bit of time here, and there is so much. Dr. Seuss. I don't even know which one of these that we should do at this point.
Well, I have no suggestions because this
they're
is
all just
maybe the
so
dumbest
ridiculous.
topic that we've.
It is so dumb, but it's interesting though. I've been reading in about Dr. Seuss, and apparently, Dr. Seuss himself was embarrassed by some of the work that he did.
Right, which is funny that never comes up in
Never
any
comes
of
up.
it.
Let's who do we got here is here's Kevin McCarthy. They're debating HR1, which is perhaps one of the strongest sort of pro-democracy, if you want to call it that, anti-corruption in government, opening up voting rights bill that I think has been presented by Democrats in decades, by any party in decades. Here's Kevin McCarthy knowing who his base is.
HR1 rewrites election law and imposes a one-size-fits-all partisan rules from Washington. Under the Constitution, we generally defer to states and counties to run elections. Democrats want to change that. First, they outlawed Dr. Seuss, and now they want to tell us what to say.
First off, did we not hear for the past 3 months nothing but complaints about the voting process in all of these various places around the country? Like all of a sudden now he's coming out and saying that states know how to run. They had 80 lawsuits across the country in localities, in states, because supposedly all of these elections were fraudulent and rigged, and the way that they were doing these things were wrong. Why wouldn't you want the opportunity to say, not, one size fits all? It's just, we have a rule. You got to do this when you vote. You got to do that when you vote. And
well, you see, it's the Democrats who want to make it worse. They want to make it even less states' rights. And the problem is that it's not enough county states' rights, even though those counties are wildly incompetent. Like, it's almost like a win-win for them, right?
Well, because they just changed their mind.
Well, no, I mean, they either they deregulate voting or just basically rig it so much in favor of white people and Republicans that they get what they want, or they lock Democrats out from ever changing it. And it's so inefficient and convoluted and terrible that they can claim voter fraud every other election for the next many decades. That's kind of their MO.
I should also say, though, however, McCarthy is right. I don't think Congress should have outlawed Dr. Seuss. That was wrong.
That was wrong. What's next, Sam?
Yeah, get your priorities.
I mean, Matt was on Twitter yesterday, a little concerned about what's going to happen to the Hardy Boys.
I know. I'm terrified that the secret tower.
Did you read all those?
No, I
read Nancy Drew.
I got the box set. I read like the first 3 of them.
The Hardy Boys. Okay, well, that's just because I'm a girl, but I just like Nancy Drew a lot better. Gotta say.
I read all the Hardy Boys, but only after reading all of the Encyclopedia Browns. So
I love Encyclopedia Browns.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Are you going to be sad? Oh, go.
The fact that they are outlawing Encyclopedia Brown in this COVID relief bill is just absurd.
I know. I mean, they keep changing. Why do they want to take all these Dr. Seuss statues off of federal land? They're tearing them down. They're defacing them. I mean, the left, then they're putting up their Antifa statues.
The way they tore down that Sneetch's statue in Virginia was just completely disrespectful.
Totally.
Very disrespectful.
Let's check out Dave Rubin's boss, Glenn Beck. See if Glenn Beck can do this whole Mr. Potato Head, Dr. Seuss thing a little bit better than Dave Rubin, who gotta probably, I don't know, he's got to practice before he goes on air with this stuff. Here is Glenn Beck bemoaning the loss of freedom in this country because Mr. Potato Head is now just Potato Head.
They have now banned 6 books from Dr. Seuss.
Pause it. They, whoever they are, have not banned anybody. They are the organization that his estate, essentially, that has decided to stop publishing 6 books because of the work that they feel that even Dr. Seuss would have been embarrassed by. One of Mr. Giesel's own family members, this is from a 2017.
This is Dr. Seuss. His pen name was not
Geisel.
Right,
yeah,
Geisel.
His real name was not Dr. Seuss.
And and there's a Dr. Seuss museum. It's in Springfield. It's not far, Springfield, Mass. And one of Mr. Giesel's own family members who helped curate an exhibit for the museum said that Mr. Giesel would agree. And that is, there are things that, like, Giesel wrote his stuff during World War II sometimes. And we had a horrible chapter in this country where we sent Japanese people to concentration camps. And there was a lot of racism involved in the way that we would portray Japanese people because of the war. And to understand, for instance, Philip Nell, a children's literature scholar at Kansas State University, said, I think to understand Seuss fully, you need to understand the complexity of his career. You need to understand that he's involved in both anti-racism and racism. And I don't think you get that if you omit the political work. They were talking about looking at his stuff in the museum. Dr. Seuss owes it to Japanese Americans. This was people who were complaining about to Japanese Americans and the American people to acknowledge the role that his racist political cartoons played so that this atrocity doesn't happen to minority groups again. And one of Giesel's own family members who helped curate an exhibit for the museum said that Mr. Giesel would agree. I think he would find it a legitimate criticism because I remember talking to him about it at least once and him saying things were done a certain way back then, said Ted Owens, great nephew of Mr. Giesel. Characterizations were done and he was a cartoonist and he tended to adopt those. And I know later in his life, he was not proud of those at all. Mr. Giesel suggested this himself decades after the war. This is Dr. Seuss. In a 1976 interview, he said of his PM cartoons, when I look at them now, they're hardly and embarrassedly badly drawn. They're full of snap judgments and that every political cartoonist has to make. So there were cartoons, representations he made that he would have been embarrassed about. Here is, it's Geisel, sorry. And so here is Glenn Beck again, talking about banning, nothing was banned. They just took it off. They stopped publishing it.
6 books from Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss. You can no longer print these 6 books. If I ran a zoo, and I think I saw it on Mulberry Street, Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, The Cat's Quizzer.
Oh, classics.
This according to a panel of educators and experts.
Who's read those?
They are banning.
They're not banning
Dr. Seuss books.
They stopped
How much
publishing them.
more do you need to see before all of America wakes up and goes, this is fascism? This is fascism. You don't destroy books. What is wrong with us, America?
Destroy books.
Go out and buy those books today. Find out if you can get them. Buy Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head because it's the end of an era. It is the end of freedom in America, where you are bullied to the point to where you better not have that book.
I mean, I would recommend going out and buying those too, because they'll probably be, sellable on eBay for,
sell them to some moron right winger.
Yeah, exactly.
Sell them to
Glenn Beck guy.
Sell them to Glenn Beck fan 123 or whatever.
You could package the Potato Heads and the Dr. Seuss books together as some type of taste of freedom.
Put a Mr. Potato Head in a little Cat in the Hat.
Well, and he also says you can no longer print these books, which actually points to the real cancel culture, which is copyright law, which has been extended far too long. And if it wasn't extended, these would all be public domain, and these people could share PDFs of these dumb books to their heart's content, and their kids could be freed from the 1984 future that this publishing company is leading them toward.
Well, wasn't that what just happened with Josh Hawley? He was canceled and persecuted by the world because his publisher decided to push off his book into a secondary publisher so they didn't get backlash from the public. Or was that Tom Cotton? I can't remember. But either way, obviously both victims. That was Hawley. I was right. Okay. They're both victims, but it's just I can't believe we're talking about Dr. Seuss in the pandemic. I
want to play this last clip and then we got to get out of here from this Idaho Republican. I've been talking about the implications of why, this goes back to, where does this sort of fear about pedophilia come from? Where does this, all of these things that are associated with women being able to go out and work, okay, leave the home. If you have childcare, that means that women can go to work. Therefore, they generate this whole sort of pedophilia scare. Like mothers need to be. We have a good example of them actually articulating this. There was a bill up for passage in Idaho that would have allowed the state of Idaho, they wouldn't even have to pay for it. They would have allowed the state of Idaho to accept a grant from the U.S. government to expand childcare in the state. And they voted it down. It'll come back up for reconsideration. It may be part of this this COVID relief bill. I'm not sure for this grant, but I think the grant already existed. $6 million in federal grants to increase early childhood education. Let's be clear about this. By making it more available and accessible. Here is Representative Charlie Shepard, Republican from Pollock, testifying against this bill. This bill did not pass. Here he is.
I think anybody does a better job than mothers in the home. And any bill that makes it easier or more convenient for mothers to come out of the home and let somebody else raise their child, I just don't think that's a good direction for us to be going.
That's Representative. Okay, and you should incidentally check out that guy on KTVB. He's pretty good, actually, for a local news guy. He's pretty good.
Not bought up by Sinclair yet?
No, not yet. But I mean, there it is. So much of these sort of knock-on issues are a function of they want to maintain what they call the nuclear family, which of course is their brand of that, which is just simply the patriarchy. That's it. And that's why they're concerned about all of it. It all emanates from that. It is I think, like, when you contemplate the misogyny that we see in this country, I mean, I think like that is so deep. Like, I think it is, I think it's very difficult for a woman to run on a national level in this country still because of stuff like that.
It's
too many ideas.
Yeah, and we have multiple problems with Hillary Clinton, but to deny that was a part of her loss is to deny reality.
Of course.
And in my view, to deny that was a part of the critique about Elizabeth Warren is to deny reality. I know that's not a popular statement, but fine.
I agree with that.
And also to deny that what we're seeing on, in state legislatures like that, and what we're seeing by people who are so obsessed with this idea is that what men in these situations particularly fear is that they are no longer centered and that there's agency outside of them. And so that's really what the patriarchy stems from. And there's just so many insidious ways that we see it. And it's not easy to point out because it's not data, it's not concrete. It's just like something that you witness and and you feel that you see as a woman. And then obviously men see it too. But anyway, yeah, it's just like amazing how ingrained it is in the lifeblood of America.
And this guy's, he's sitting up there and he's just articulating this like, yeah, I don't know if that was the argument that carried the day, but one argument did. All right, a couple IMs and then we'll get out of here. Sorry for cut it short, folks. Thank you from Tennessee. Neera Tanden, more like nowhere near a cabinet position. Am I right? That's pretty good. Jay Tingle. Rosie Ruiz was like 1976. Even nuttier, she took the T. That's what it was. She took the subway to circumvent the race
leftism.
Car. Yeah, the scandal pointed to lack of seriousness in the management of women's sports, probably driving Title IX. Wyoming, Ryan got the vaccine Sunday, spent hours on the phone calling pharmacies asking for doses. And Sunday, we found a pharmacy with 34 doses. The Pfizer ran down to my PJs, waited for 2 hours, called people around, doses expire. Also had 0 issues my first dose other than this sore arm. I'm going to try that actually later today. We're going to see. Please donate at bit.ly helping MS to provide immediate relief and help build mutual aid efforts in Mississippi. Here in Jackson, Mississippi, everyone has been boiling without water for 3 weeks. It's a result of decades of divestment dating back to white flight in the 60s and 70s. We need state and federal funds to build our infrastructure. But the only thing we're getting a repeal of the mask mandate and blame levied at the local government of a majority Black capital city. Brendan, you got that? It's bit.ly/helping MS. Sean from NorCal. Every time I watch the Senate, they say COVID relief is priority 1, dire emergency. But after saying this, they get back to dealing with everything but COVID relief. Can anyone tell me about dealing with this issue last makes it an emergency? I mean, I think part of it is it's got to wind through the committees. But yes, they could have done this quicker, it seems to me. Josh from Chicago, at least you can hold Democrats accountable in daylight for everyone to see. Matt is right about that. Is it exciting? No, but Democrats will always be a better enemy for the left than the Republicans. Yes, and in the meantime, there is, at least some floor in which their floor is just simply lower. Higher than the Republicans one in terms of where they let people drop. Comrade Mario, the first weeks of Biden presidency tell us anything. The 2022 midterms will be a historical bloodbath, both because of completely unnecessary seeds of resentment being planted in the COVID relief bill. Example, getting a check from Trump, but not Biden, and the Supreme Court voting rights decision. Despair is the proper response because it's born not out of nihilism, but out of the current reality that Dems, purposefully or not, are shitting the bed at every turn. I mean, look, they have made some big mistakes politically, but I also think that it's conceivable. It's really a function of what's happening with the economy at that time. According to the New York Times, it looks like Biden has caved on the stimulus check limits. Right, we talked about that. Kowalski from Nebraska. Hey, Sam, will you take my 308 call? I'd like to shoot you about the state meeting. I will, but we didn't take calls today. And the final IM of the day. Oh, geez. Good morning, comrade. Capitalism, socialism debate is always fascinating. Matt brought up Boschgar, and it would be great if you had him on the show to talk about these things. It's also a bit of a shame that Jamie couldn't be a part of the capitalism, socialism discussion. I would love to hear what she's had to say of that in her own words. She'll be on tomorrow. We can talk about it then. Teamster from Chicago. Why doesn't anyone bring up the fact that these checks were called for in January? We're now in March. Shouldn't that affect the size of the checks? Shouldn't they be close to double? I mean, if we were charging interest, get that type of interest on college loan. All right, folks. Matt, Brendan, Emma, good job. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.